Christmas is a time for traditions. And one of my favorite Christmas traditions every year for a good couple of years was a little something called DBCember. Team Fourstar is a channel that myself, and I'd be willing to bet a decent amount of you guys just for how large they are, really enjoy. And although their big claim to fame was Dragon Ball Z Abridged, they had another project that I love tuning into every year at Christmas time. That being DBCember, a top 12, formerly top 24 countdown of topics like villains, movies, techniques, fights, a lot of the big topics that people talk about in the Dragon Ball franchise. They do kind of like a 12 Days of Christmas kind of countdown, releasing one entry a day all the way until their number one pick would drop on Christmas Eve. They'd also do an honorable mentions video and show off the decision process for the list on their Patreon. And I really miss these videos. I miss that they do this. I miss their style of release. I miss being a little curious each day what the next pick was going to be and getting that a little bit of insight from them into what they thought about the franchise all the way up until Christmas. It felt kind of special. It was fun to look forward to a new drop every day, hear their takes, and then see other people reminisce on the entry or get very, very angry that a certain placement wasn't higher and they'd fight about it in the comments. And I still go back and watch those lists every few months or so, usually around Christmas time. So, inspired by these guys, who've been a pretty decent influence on my want to create and wanting to keep such a really cool idea alive, I'm reigniting this tradition, and with this channel's favorite subject matter. No, not half-baked 3 a.m. thoughts on Mandalorian Season 3, Monster Hunter. Every year, a new topic. Every Christmas, a new countdown, complete with a big unscripted honorable mentions video so you won't be angry with me that your top choices weren't on the list. And a behind-the-scenes list-making video that can be found on Patreon once the list is complete and fully uploaded on YouTube. Links are, of course, down below. And we're calling this bad boy Merry Huntmas. So, as a brush up on how this works, for the uninformed, starting December 12th, I will be releasing each entry in the top 12 day by day. That'll be one new video every day. On December 23rd, I'll be dropping the unscripted honorable mentions video leading up to the number one entry on Christmas Eve. Coinciding with the number one video will be a 3-hour video on the Patreon of myself and my two friends going through every single entry in this year's list and putting this top 12 together. So that's going to be 13 videos in a row every day for you guys. But what are the entries this year, you may ask? Well, if you're gonna do something like this, you start out big, you start out profound. So this year, for the first Merry Huntmas, we are going over the top 12 flagship monsters in Monster Hunter. Feel free to preemptively get angry if you so choose. Let's go over a couple of ground rules. If a monster was a flagship for a Monster Hunter game, they're taken into consideration for the top 12. This includes every flagship from a game that may contain one or more, so every member of the Fated Four as well as Bloodbath Diablos are on the table. What else is on the table are flagships from spin-off games, such as Frontier, Explorer, and Online. Additionally, placeholder flagships who helmed these games before their more commonly associated flagship are also on the table. There are only two groups of monsters that I exclude, those being the flagships of games that do not follow the conventional Monster Hunter formula, such as the Stories games, and although the wiki considers them flagship monsters, I did not consider the headliner monsters for every single season and update of Monster Hunter Frontier. That would be like saying Elatrion is the flagship of Iceborne Title Update 4. We did, however, consider the headlining flagship for each of Frontier's major 3 expansions, those being Frontier Forward, Frontier G, and Frontier Z. So, we have 29 entries and only 12 can make the list. Now, we considered a lot of things for this list. This wasn't a clinically and mathematically carried out process, but here's what we considered. We tried to weigh these monsters as flagships, what they mean to the game and to the generation they come from, what their impact on the franchise and the fan base has been, and how prominent they feel within and outside of their own title. Things like this were the most important criteria. Next, we looked at fight quality and presence within the game's story and narrative, which we viewed as probably the two most important categories under base impact. Beneath that, we looked at things like gear, design, ecology, lore, and sound design, a bunch of other qualities that helped maybe move things up and down a little bit, but weren't overall the most important bits of information. Additionally, we're a little bit wishy-washy on the variations. We tried not to factor in their fights all that much, but if a flagship monster spawned a lot of very cool variations or had a cool nature of creating variations, we factor that in. As well, if a variation really kind of tied in with a monster's story and added a flagship-esque presence that bolstered that monster's perception within the franchise and within their game, we did factor that in. I'll stress again, this list wasn't run through an equation. There's a mix of bias, objectivity, and subjectivity all kind of blended in together. And this list might look very different in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. And don't be too upset if your favorite doesn't make it onto the top 12 list. They'll get their flowers in the honorable mentions video, and honestly, there's like 20 flagships who deserve to be on this top 12 list. Some of them just didn't deserve to be on that list more than 12 others. And this was made in good fun. Stay tuned for December 12th of 2023, where we will kick off a new spin on the old classic. Merry Huntmas is debuting in just a couple of days, and I'll see you then.